Similar to an array of right field dandelions at your local Little League field, another season of FTB Cover 5 has sprouted like an unwanted weed. For the newbies, FTB Cover 5 is our stopgap early summer series that bridges the agonizing wait between the end of spring practice and the return of FTB film study with Coach Caduti. Today, we're listing 5 viable All-American candidates on Penn State's loaded 2023 roster. And before you bark at your laptop, 5 All-Americans on one team, that's impossible. Well, Penn State has done it twice before, in 1978 and 1994. So why don't you just quit your yapping, all right?
Number 5. Chop Robinson.
Unlike the poor, unsuspecting QBs he blindsided last season, we could sit here and smugly tell you we saw Chop Robinson coming. That when Penn State landed the productive but improperly used Maryland transfer last spring, we knew he'd tag in for the departed Arnold Ebiketie and instantly emerge as an equally disruptive answer on the edge. That stats like Robinson's conference best 48 QB pressures, 5.5 sacks, and 10 tackles for loss didn't raise our overgrown eyebrows. But, like that wooden-toothed, axe-swinging cherry tree chopper we read about in 3rd grade history, we cannot tell a lie. So here's the truth. We were seriously underwhelmed with Chop's true freshman Maryland film, and had serious concerns whether he could win with anything other than speed as he flipped from a 3-4 outside linebacker to a 4-3 defensive end. Thankfully for us, the weather last April was a lot nicer than this April, which led to a waning enthusiasm to write, so that Old Takes Exposed blog post never saw the light of day. Still a smidge undersized for the position, Robinson nonetheless proved capable of being an every-down defensive end in 2022. Showcasing rare core strength to turn corners, flatten at the apex of his rush, and close distances without decelerating, Robinson was PFF's highest-graded Power 5 pass rusher last season. Chop's explosive first step off the line of scrimmage and hyperactive hands put immediate pressure on pass protectors that can occasionally lead to speed-to-power counters when they cheat in hopes of beating Robinson to the point of attack. As a run defender, Robinson's initial burst allows him to split blockers and penetrate rush lanes, resulting in havoc plays that sort of covered up for the fact that Chop's lack of heft made it difficult for him to hold his gap all the time. The additional 15 pounds Chop packed on his frame this past offseason should help in that regard.
Number 4. Nick Singleton.
Man, Nick Singleton is fast, huh? But that's not news to anybody. Stevie Wonder can see that, because he's not really blind. Everyone can see that. A fluid, effortless runner with a sprinter stride, Singleton is fast enough to outrun angles and make announcers in a foot race commentary entirely anticlimactic. However, what we're referencing was Singleton's accelerated aptitude in absorbing and quickly incorporating the necessary nuances of playing the running back position. Minor details like patience, setting up blocks, and reading defenders that weren't needed to succeed in Singleton's triple option high school offense. Thanks to his undeniable talent, Singleton never really suffered through growing pains as a college freshman, but he did have to traverse a bit of a learning curve, fighting off the urge to color outside the lines and either cut everything back or bounce carries and outrace defenders to the edge. Right around mid to late October, though, the imaginary glowing light bulb finally popped up above Singleton's helmet as he began to trust his eyes, stay on his designated run path, and puncture defenses both in between the tackles and out on the edge, maturing into a more efficient runner without sacrificing any explosivity. Illustrating that shift, according to PFF, Singleton's average yards lost per game on negative runs plummeted midway through the season, while his breakaway runs per game, those being carries that generated 15-plus yards on the ground, ticked up slightly. So, you might be wondering, given Singleton's noticeable growth as a runner, why is he only number 4 on this list? Well, recent history suggests that Singleton's abbreviated workload, as he's once again forecasted to split carries with Katron Allen, might make it impossible to generate the rush yards needed to be an All-American. During the past decade, 56% of first-team All-Americans exceeded the 2,000-yard mark on the ground. Even if Singleton became the first Penn State runner since Miles Sanders in 2018 to tote the rock 200 times in a season, he'd still have to better his true freshman average of 6.8 yards per rush to stack up statistically with bell cows in other offenses.
Number 3. Kalyn King.
The damned if you don't alternative for teams wishing to steer clear of the damned if you do option of throwing at Joey Porter Jr., Penn State sophomore cornerback Kalyn King absolutely feasted on footballs flung his direction last season. No longer burdened with the unfair and frankly unrealistic expectations born out of James Franklin's glowing, flowery, rat poison remarks uttered during spring ball 2 years ago, King's 21 total passes defensed in 2022 bested every Power 5 cornerback. Opposing QBs completed a paltry 45.8% of throws targeted at King, while PFF's opaque grading metrics dubbed him the best single coverage cornerback in all of college football with a score of 93.6. Beyond numbers, though, the most impressive aspect of King's 2022 portfolio has to be the massive, overflowing sampler platter of traits he put on film. There's just no good way to beat King. His loose, WD-40 lacquered hips nullify double moves, enabling him to stay sticky in stop-and-start situations. In press man assignments, King's post-snap punch stammers receivers when it lands, while his recovery speed shrinks downfield separation when it doesn't. Testing King vertically is a nightmare thanks to his length, leaping ability, and elite ball skills. Testing King horizontally proved to be a non-starter as well, as his strength and competitive nature took center stage on screens and quick perimeter throws. So what's a team to do? Easy. Throw at someone else. And in the end, that anticipated and well-earned respect opposing offensive coordinators show King this season might roadblock his path towards receiving All-America honors. Since 2018, first-team AP All-American cornerbacks have averaged a fraction more than 63 targets per season, which is already more action than King saw last season when teams purposely shied away from Porter Jr.
Number 2. Abdul Carter.
The star of the most inauspicious grand opening, grand closing debut in Penn State football history, linebacker Abdul Carter flipped the script following his forgettable one-play first act versus Purdue. By the end of his true freshman season, Carter had supplanted veteran Curtis Jacobs at the will, topping all Nittany Lions defenders with 6.5 sacks and 2 forced fumbles, despite only being on the field for 514 of Penn State's 953 total defensive snaps. Even scarier, according to Penn State's spring roster and leaked 40 times, Carter will be bigger, stronger, and faster as a sophomore. While Carter remains several stages shy of being a complete linebacker, it probably won't matter much in regards to becoming an All-American. That's because he'll excel even more this season than last in the disruptive, game-wrecking, stat-compiling areas of playing defense that tend to grab voters' attention. It also doesn't hurt that Carter has a defensive coordinator in Manny Diaz who's unafraid to apply pressure and set up unique talents like Carter for success. For all the wonderful things that Brent Pry did at Penn State, stats convey that he wasn't as heavy-handed as Diaz when it came to sending the weak side linebacker after the quarterback. Even as a true freshman, Carter rushed the passer on a greater percentage of snaps than all-everything Micah Parsons did in either of his 2 seasons in blue and white.
Number 1. Olu Fashanu.
Question: has Penn State's fan base truly grasped the gravitas of Olu Fashanu's stunning, against-the-grain, delayed gratification decision to return for one more year of college football? To borrow a phrase from Chris Collinsworth, here's a guy who the multiplying swarms of NFL draft experts all agreed would have been the first offensive tackle off the board this year, not next year. Here's a guy who theoretically should have had $18 million direct deposited in his checking account 2 weeks ago, just like former Ohio State lineman Paris Johnson, the actual first offensive tackle taken in this draft thanks to Fashanu's selflessness, did in reality. And yet, here's a guy who's still here in Happy Valley, the 320-pound rock-steady cornerstone of an undeniably talented but yet unproven offense. A filled-out mountain of a man equipped with Fred Astaire feet, Fashanu has yet to allow a sack in 351 pass protection reps during his abbreviated but brilliant college career. Edge rushers have tried everything against Fashanu, but to no avail. When they line up wide, like wide in another zip code basically, Fashanu's uncanny lateral movement erases angles at the edge, forcing pass rushers to work through his entire squared-up frame. When they've tried a more direct approach and stuck hands or a helmet in Fashanu's chest, his aptitude to sink, squat, and anchor negates defenders' forward momentum several steps shy of the quarterback. You can talk about the Aces or Penn State's dynamic backfield duo or the new infusions to the Nittany Lions receiving corps, but the main accelerant in Drew Aller's development this season will be Fashanu's Michelin star blindside protection, and that should be more than enough to earn All-American honors. Because there aren't any easily accessible or digestible statistics for offensive linemen, preseason All-Americans, of which Fashanu will be, tend to get the benefit of the doubt when Diet Coke sommelier sports writers pick end-of-season honors. Since 2016, 58% of offensive tackles who were All-Americans in August remained All-Americans in December, making it more likely than not that Fashanu will become the first Penn State lineman in 15 years to receive this prestigious distinction.